people around the world join rallies to honor Paris victims. People gathered in cities around the world on Sunday to honor the 17 victims who died during 3 days of bloodshed in Paris last week, and to support freedom of expression. The biggest event was in Paris, where tens of thousands of people, including more than 40 world leaders, streamed into the heart of the city for a rally of national unity, days after the attacks on the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, police officers and a kosher grocery. A look at the gatherings in other cities across the globe. Berlin. About 18,000 people gathered in front of the French embassy next to Berlin's iconic Brandenburg Gate in an impressive show of solidarity for the victims of the Paris attacks. Many brought flowers or pencils and help-up signs saying "Je suis Charlie" or "Je suis Juif," I am a Jew. Some protesters also held up cartoons published by the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and played French chansons on CD players they had brought along. Many participants at the rally were French citizens, but altogether, the crowd reflected the cosmopolitan flair of Berlin. People could be heard speaking a melange of German, English, French, Russian and many other European languages. Marieke Zwarter, a 24-year-old Dutch university student who studies film and lives in Berlin, said she attended the rally to show that we should not be afraid and will not allow these terrorists to divide our societies. Her friend, 20-year-old Russian Polina Panfilova, who studies political science in Berlin, was carrying white flowers. "It's important that we're all here," she said. "We are sending a clear signal that we won't let the terrorists win." London. Landmarks including Tower Bridge and the London Eye Ferris wheel were lit in the red, white and blue of the French tricolour flag. The French colours were also projected onto the facade of the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square, where more than 1,000 people gathered Sunday in solidarity with the French people. Many carried "Je suis Charlie" signs, and some held pens aloft as a tribute to the slain cartoonists. Mayor Boris Johnson attended the rally and said it had been organized to express with Paris our feelings of unity in grief and in outrage, and obviously in determination of these two great historic cities of freedom to stand together. London has been hit by several major terrorist attacks, the most lethal in July 2005, when 4 Al-Qaeda-inspired bombers killed 52 people on 3 subway trains and a bus. Brussels. About 20,000 people marched silently through the centre of Brussels, carrying banners reading "Je suis Charlie" and united against hatred. A bomb threat Sunday afternoon forced the evacuation of the offices of the Brussels newspaper Le Soir, but several hours later there was no indication of anything serious going on. In the city of Ghent, in western Belgium, about 3,000 people took part in a silent march. Madrid. Hundreds of people gathered in Madrid to express their revulsion at the Paris attacks and support for freedom of speech. Several hundred Muslims carrying banners saying "Not in our name" rallied at Madrid's Attica Square, next to the train station where in March 2004 bombs on rush-hour trains killed 191 people in Europe's deadliest Islamic terror attack. A small group of Muslim religious leaders then laid a wreath with a ribbon saying "In solidarity with France" outside the French embassy in Madrid where the ambassador received them. At nearby Puerta del Sol Square, hundreds of mainly French protesters drew cartoons and held aloft signs saying "Je suis Charlie." Rallies were also held in other Spanish cities, including Barcelona and Valencia. Moscow. About 100 people, mostly French citizens, took part in a so-called silent march in Moscow's Gorky Park to honor the 17 victims of the terror attacks in France and show support for freedom of expression. "I am a French citizen who wants to tell the terrorists that we will fight against the terror and for freedom," said France's ambassador to Russia, Jean-Maurice Ripert, who was among the marchers. In the evening, dozens of Muscovites came to the French embassy to lay flowers and express their solidarity. Istanbul. Scores of demonstrators gathered in central Istanbul for a small solidarity rally with France. Minutes after the remembrance got underway, a man, apparently critical of the gesture, tried to cut them off, shouting Muslim blood is being shed. The man was detained and carried away by riot police. The silent march continued despite the interruption. About 120 people holding up pencils, pens and posters reading "We are all Charlie" walked down Istanbul's main Istiklal Avenue toward the French consulate. Beirut. Around 200 protesters gathered in the Lebanese capital Beirut to condemn the attacks in France, carrying signs that said "We are not afraid," and "Jesus Ahmad," referring to the name of the French Muslim policeman who was killed by the attackers as he tried to defend the office of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. The demonstration was made more poignant for its location, a reflective pool built to commemorate a prominent Arab writer, Samir Kassir, who was assassinated 10 years ago during a spate of killings that targeted politicians and writers living in Lebanon who were critical of neighboring Syria. Jerusalem. Several hundred people gathered at a memorial ceremony at Jerusalem's City Hall to express solidarity with France and the French Jewish community. The gathering, led by Mayor Nabarkit and the city's chief rabbi, included many French Jewish immigrants to Israel. Many participants held signs saying "Jesus Charlie," or "Israel is Charlie," written in Hebrew. The city said it was hoisting 1,500 French flags throughout Jerusalem, and setting up a makeshift memorial downtown where people could post sympathy notes. Many Israelis have identified with France, both because of Israel's long history battling Islamic militants and because 4 of the victims in Paris were Jewish. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu led a delegation to attend the mass rally in Paris. The Israeli leader called on French Jews to move to Israel amid a rising tide of attacks on their community. He also announced that the 4 Jewish victims, killed in a hostage standoff at a kosher supermarket, were expected to be buried in Israel. Ramla. About 200 Palestinians and foreign supporters held a solidarity rally in the central Manara Square in the West Bank city of Ramla. Participants held French and Palestinian flags. Yasser Abed-Rabbo, a senior Palestinian official, said France and the Palestinians share the same values: liberty, equality and saving the modern civilization against the criminals who are spreading all across the Arab world, and they have attacked the heart of France. Gaza City. In Gaza, about 20 people held a candlelight vigil outside the French Cultural Center in solidarity with France and to condemn the Paris attacks. "We are here in this vigil against terrorism," said Raji Sourani, director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. "The French people are friends of the Palestinian people and support them, so we are supporting them in return." The French center has been closed to the public since December, when unknown assailants detonated explosives targeting its exterior walls several weeks after a similar attack on the building. Gaza's Hamas leaders have condemned the attack on the French satirical newspaper, but have pointedly refrained from mentioning the attack on the kosher supermarket in which 4 Jews were killed. On Sunday, a Hamas spokesman, Fawzi Baum, condemned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for trying to make a connection between the Palestinian militants and the Paris attackers. Hamas. Resistance is a legitimate one. It is a party that protects our citizens, our lands and our holy places, he said. Sydney. Hundreds of people rallied in downtown Sydney's Martin Place, a plaza where a shotgun-wielding Islamic State movement supporter took 18 people hostage in a cafe last month. The standoff ended 16 hours later when police stormed the cafe in a barrage of gunfire to free the captives. 2 of the hostages and the gunman died. More than 500 Australians and French nationals stood side by side holding signs bearing the words Je suis Charlie, French for I am Charlie, and freedom as they marched in condemnation of the Paris attacks. We have to stand united, France's ambassador to Australia, Christophe Lecourtier, told the crowd. Among the French now residing in Sydney who attended the rally was Felix Delhomme, 27. People are sending a message that we're all together, he said. We want to be able to maintain our freedom of speech. We are mostly concerned about the backlash there might be against the Muslim community. They're not more responsible for what happened than I am. Tokyo. A couple of hundred people, mostly French residents of Japan, gathered in the courtyard of the French Institute in Tokyo, holding a minute of silence and singing La Marseillaise, the French national anthem. They then held up pieces of paper that read Je suis Charlie in French or the Japanese translation. The institute, which functions as a language school, was running as normal during the ceremony, with students shuffling in, as the French flag, tied with a black ribbon, hung over the balcony. I came here to give support to fellow artists and I believe we should stand so these things don't happen again, said Alexander Kerbam, 43, a French resident of Japan who works as a body painter and hairstylist. New York. On Saturday, hundreds of mostly French-speaking New Yorkers braved below freezing temperatures and held pens aloft at a rally in Washington Square Park, where a leather-clad pole dancer gyrated in a provocative display meant to reflect the over-the-top cartoons in Charlie Hebdo. The dancer's live soundtrack came from a concert grand piano hauled into the Manhattan Square for the occasion as she whirled under a sign that read Je suis Charlie. Olivier Souchard, a French-born New York resident who brought his family and friends, explained the fierce support for freedom of expression that drove Charlie Hebdo's images of the Prophet Muhammad. What we are afraid of is less freedom for more security, it's muzzling, Souchard said. He said he's been in touch with his friend Philippe Lunken, a Charlie Hebdo columnist who is recovering from surgery after being shot in the face in the attack.